Hello everyone, Jason from Truth Behind the Magic here. It has been quite a while. I apologize. I started a new full-time job and have been doing part-time MBA classes, basically full-time since one of the classes was a half-semester course, so altogether it was kind of like a full-time workload, but that half-semester course just ended, so hopefully I'm going to get back to making videos again. Because I definitely do miss talking about the college program and all that good stuff. But anyway, recently one of the latest videos I did before taking the hiatus was about whether or not you should take classes on the program. And I lightly touched on some of the information that will be in this video, but not a lot of it, and certainly not as detailed. But I realized recently, I was like, maybe that's not the place where I should have started, because even though that's very important as far as whether or not you should take classes, and to just kind of rehash that episode very simply, my recommendation was that you do not take classes on the program, and it certainly still is my recommendation. But I realized that the real place to start with that may have been talking about simply what happens with your registration or enrollment when you do the program, and how that messes up your graduation timeline. Because that can be important to a lot of people, and it's really one of the first things you should even think about when considering the program, is how this is going to affect your college situation, because for some people, I mean, it might affect it so much that they don't even want to do it anymore. But anyway, we'll basically start off with the discussion, which there's a lot more information that I was able to come up with than what I thought, so this should be a fairly long video compared to what I thought it would be. But anyway, we're going to start off with, will you have to drop enrollment to do the program? And by that, I mean literally, will you have to essentially be in, like, limbo/hiatus status with your university during the program, dropping enrollment in terms of not being registered for any classes. So yes, you will have to drop enrollment unless you are taking one or more classes during the program, which, like I said, if this is the first video you're seeing here, I would suggest you go watch that one right after this, where I talked about taking classes on the program. Because there was a lot more detailed information in that video about that subject. But yeah, the only way to not drop enrollment to an extent is literally to take classes on the program. Or I should say, not necessarily drop enrollment, but the only way to not set yourself back at all, the only way to officially still be taking classes at your university is to take one or more classes. So for the vast majority of people, we get to the second segment of that, which is what happens if you don't take any actual classes. There's a few options, basically all of which of these I have done in one way or another. But the first option is, a lot of colleges and universities will offer a course, because it technically is a course, but you don't have to do anything. That is placed on your registration, literally just as a placeholder, so you can remain technically enrolled to the university, even though you're not actually taking the time to take any classes. My first program, I was at East Carolina University, and they had what was called a co-op program, and it was mainly for people that don't take college all at once, like they're taking off a semester to work and then they'll do a semester of college, that kind of thing. And it was so they could remain enrolled while taking a semester off to work, and that's essentially what the college program is anyway. I mean, it is an internship, but you are taking off time to work and get that experience. So that program allowed me to retain enrollment at the university in terms of not having to go through an application process to get back in. But one major caveat to any of those programs, and I'm sure they're not called a co-op everywhere, I'm sure various universities will have different names for them, But the big caveat there is that it can potentially affect your financial aid, especially if it's the first semester of the aid year, which is typically the fall, because then the semester when you come back might be kind of weird, because technically the first semester of that aid year you weren't a full-time student, which might mess up your spring semester. It's not supposed to, as far as I know. I cannot remember. I remember there being some confusion at ECU when I had that co-op class on my registration. There was some confusion with financial aid, which was one of the reasons I didn't go back there. But I think if I had, like, contacted financial aid and really dug into it, I would have been able to solve that, because you're not supposed to just straight up lose your financial aid because you didn't do full-time for one semester. But that's the first option, which I guess technically is the easiest option, in terms of having a seamless transition from the program back to classes, because you just register for classes like normal, because you are still enrolled at the university in technical terms. The second option is that some colleges offer what I would call an easy re-enrollment program for people who are already taking classes there. And basically all it is an application that bypasses the admissions process by simply readmitting you to the university after you fill out a short application for readmission. It's not like the entire application process where you have to get all that stuff, the transcripts and the very long application, and then you don't even know if you're going to get in. It's like you're guaranteed to get back in. And not every school has this. I know that for a fact. My second program, after I'd transferred back in my home area to UNC Asheville, that's what I did, because they didn't have a co-op program type thing. So I just had to drop enrollment. Because that's the only one of the things about this, is that it does temporarily, like, de-enroll you completely from that school. But it does at least offer a way to very easily have guaranteed re-enrollment to that university without needing to pay all the fees and stuff for an entire application process, or having to pay it to have the co-op class on your, whatever it may be called, on your registration for a semester. But it is a little bit less seamless than having the temporary class on your registration, just because you, like I said, you do technically drop enrollment and then have to re-enroll. And similarly to the first option, it definitely could have an effect on your financial aid, once again, especially if it's that first aid semester of the year. In the terms of the, like, financial aid year, the fall semester is usually the first one. But if it's the second one, a lot of that doesn't really apply, because you've already gotten your aid for the first semester. They're not going to retroactively go back and say you don't qualify for that. So that is one really good thing about the spring programs, is that there's less of a chance of your financial aid getting messed up, because you'll already have taken the fall semester, so really anything that happens to the spring one doesn't really matter. Unless you're taking summer classes, then it could mess you up, but summer classes usually don't apply for aid anyway, so... And the third option, which is what I would call the nuclear option, would be to have to completely drop out of the university, drop enrollment, and have to go through the entire admissions process again. And that is extremely rare, but I have heard of it, where colleges just don't offer any kind of program to either have people remain enrolled or just have, like, a simple readmission process. And I would say that's typically just smaller private schools that would have that. So obviously that would be a massive gamble if you're going to have to completely drop out of school and not even know if you're going to get back in again. But it's so rare. It's probably only going to apply to like a handful of people each application period for the college program. Especially if you're in a public school, they're going to have something in place. And the fourth and final option that is very rare and is really kind of not an option, and you'll hear why in a second, but that's not having to drop enrollment at all. Like, it'll just be business as usual. You won't have to have a temporary class on your registration. You'll just be applying for classes like normal, but that's only an option if you are doing an alumni program over the summer, or if you're an international program person that just so happens to have a program over the summer. And the reason I say it's not really an option is because obviously alumni people have done the program before, so they'll probably know kind of how it works, and it's not something that's obviously not a program you can just walk into. You have to have done the program before. But in those cases, you can just remain enrolled like normal, register for the fall and spring semester. You won't be able to do a summer semester, but you won't have to have a temporary hold or anything. You'll just do the program, then go back to school as normal afterwards. That's what I did for my final program in 2023. That was over the summer. I was just there for about 3 months and then went back to college about 2 weeks after it ended. Now we'll move on to the discussion of the graduation timeline. Essentially the question being, how much will the program set you back? Because, I mean, that is a valid question. How long is your college experience going to be delayed by doing this? And it really depends on a few things. The first of those simply being the obvious one, which is the length of the program. And to kind of preface that, the program used to have regular programs and then advantage programs. Regular was usually about 4 months, maybe a little bit shorter or a little bit longer. And advantage was pretty much always 7 months or more. And you would actually indicate that on your application, which one you preferred. And that's what happened to me in 2019 on the first program. I wanted to do fall advantage, so I knew signing up for it that I was applying for a 7-month program. It's a little bit different now because you do not select which program you want to do. You simply select a date range that you are available. And my second program in 2022 was like that because I selected a range of about 8 months, but they only gave me a program that was about 5.5 months. And that can be a bit of a drawback because when you apply, you don't really know what your date range is going to be. I mean, you know the range that you tell them, but you really don't know how long you're going to be there and exactly when that might be. So you can't really plan ahead as well nowadays because they just kind of throw that information at you whenever they decide to. And just the obvious wisdom would be that longer programs are, of course, going to set you back a bit more, especially if you're someone who normally takes courses over the summer, because those advantage programs, even though they're not called that anymore, they go over the summer, including a spring or fall semester, so you will miss out on, you know, a full semester plus summer if you're someone that usually takes them during the summer. I really wasn't somebody like that until taking master's classes, but that's kind of different. But once again, that's not really necessarily a bad thing that you are losing extra time just because the experience you're getting and the boost that it'll have to the resume that you're getting is well worth it in the end. And the second and probably most important factor as to how long it will take you is simply how important it is to you that you graduate quickly and what your personal timeline is for that. If a 4-year graduation window is paramount to you, like you have friends that you don't want to get behind or whatever, and it's just absolutely imperative to you that you graduate within whatever that specific window is, then you're probably going to only want to participate in a 4-month program and potentially even take a class or two while you're doing it, which, like I said, go watch that other video because I do not recommend that. But I mean, if it is 100% paramount to you that you do not fall behind at all, you'll have to just participate in a short program and maybe take a class or two, because that way it'll only set you back about 2 or 3 classes at most, which you can make that up pretty easily over a few semesters. But yeah, that factor is really, once again, probably only going to apply to a small set of people that really don't want to get set back at all by this. But kind of to get to the latter third of the video, I just want to talk about my realistic view on how much I think you'll be set back by the program, or delayed, I should say, not really set back, because that's kind of a negative term, but you're actually getting ahead by doing the program, honestly. And as well as just some of my tips relating to the subject. But just bluntly, you are going to be delayed at least a semester by the program. It's pretty much unavoidable, just due to the nature of the program. Unless you do take those classes on the program and you will have no fun on the program, you are going to be working nonstop. In addition to your actual work, you will have to deal with that. And it is just not something I recommend doing on the program. And once again, it's fine to lose the time, because the value you are getting from doing the program is way higher than the opportunity cost of graduating a semester late. It is not a fair trade-off. Like, you're getting way more than 6 months ahead, or 4 months, whatever, when you do this program, and just your journey, your career journey and everything. It is way more of a value than the time you will lose from doing the program. But I will say, my personal recommendation on this matter is I would recommend setting aside a year for the program. Plan to take a year off of college for the program, especially if you were taking a program that is 6 months long or longer. And there's 3 major reasons for that. The first is that by setting aside a year in your planning, it ensures that you do not need to worry about participating in a longer program, especially if you plan on extending, potentially to the 11-month maximum that you're allowed to do by law on the internship. You won't have to worry about being crunched for time, because you will have already planned to have up to a year set off for this. The second big reason is that it allows you to not worry about financial aid at all while you are on the program, about that being altered in some way, about it being completely removed or just messed up. But I will say there's a caveat to that, because like I mentioned earlier, if your program is starting in the fall semester, then you'll have just for example, if you do the entire year, you would have the fall semester on the program, summer if that's important to you, and spring. But your aid won't get messed up for that, because it'll just be, or messed up from that, I should say, because it'll just be like that academic financial year didn't exist for you. So there's nothing to get messed up. You would just apply for FAFSA again the next year and it would be its own thing. But if your program does start in the spring, it could still mess you up. Because you will be doing the spring semester, then summer, then the fall semester, then that final spring semester is the one that could get messed up, the one when you're coming back from the program, because your fall semester will have been technically away on the program, so that could mess up your full-time status or whatever, even though it's really not supposed to. Like, financial aid is really supposed to be a semester basis, but they could look at it as you were not full-time the entire year, so you don't get certain things. But yeah, that's one thing that is kind of a pro for the fall semester, is it has a better chance of not, or the fall program, I should say, has a better chance of not messing that up if you're doing a full year. Otherwise, it was the opposite, like I described earlier. If you're just doing a 4-month program or whatever that may be, you'll probably want to take it in the spring if financial aid is that big of a deal to you, because the fall semester will already be over. And the money will have been dispersed. But the third factor for that, and probably the most important factor of taking off a full year, is that you are going to be wiped out after the program, especially if it was a longer program, you know, 7+ month program. You were going to be running nonstop while you were in Orlando, equally from work and fun, because you will have your, 4 or 5 days, maybe more, these, because they like to work them these days, but maybe more of that as far as working, and then your off days, you will be in the parks. I can guarantee you will be, pretty much every weekend. And when you get back home, you will feel like you need a vacation from the program. Even though in some ways the program is like a vacation from college. But then once you get back, you're going to feel like you need a hiatus from the program just to get back to normal. And going immediately back to school a week or two after the program can be very tough, especially because you're not in the mindset of school because you just came back from all that craziness. You only have a week or two or even less. It can just be a few days to actually prepare for the semester. And that is not fun. Those were all big reasons why I took essentially a year off for my first 2 programs. After my first program, I was supposed to go back to East Carolina. That would have been in January of 2020, before all the COVID madness happened. But yeah, I was supposed to go back to ECU, but I had been on that co-op class, so I still had enrollment at the university, and I think my financial aid was fine. Like I said earlier, I think there was a little bit of confusion with that, but I could have had it sorted out. But I decided to go back home and chill for a while, basically, after that program, because I'd been gone from home for so long. And that was, once again, a lot of that being due to the fact that you're just wiped out after doing a long program like that. But I ultimately ended up transferring to UNC Asheville to be closer to home, and I started my first fall semester there. It was during COVID, the fall semester of 2020, after being out for about 14 months total. And that felt like a good time to be away from school, at least for me. And my second program was similar, but was kind of weird because it was supposed to be a 6-month program, about June, or early January to early June. Or maybe it was late June, I honestly can't even remember. But it ended up being cut short. I had to leave about 3 months into it. But I still remained out of college until the next semester just because I couldn't enroll. Well, maybe I could have done summer classes, but not counting that, it gave me about 9 months off from January to, well, I guess it would have been 8, from January to August. And once again, that felt like a good amount of time. And my third and final program, the alumni program, was the only one that I went right back to school after. And that was fine because it was only a 3-month program. I knew that from the start. And with it being over the summer, I knew that I had to go back immediately right after because I didn't want to get set back any more than I had been from the other 2 programs. So I was comfortable going immediately back to school in that situation. But yeah, really, kind of my last pro tip on this is that regardless of what your situation is, how long you plan on staying down there, and how you plan to retain enrollment at your university. You're going to want to start gathering your information early. As soon as you are accepted into the program, you should contact your academic advisor. They'll have a lot of information for you, most likely. They'll be able to tell you how the school handles taking a semester or two off. And your school may even have a Disney College Program liaison, who will be able to tell you exactly what you need to do. And that's what happened to me when I was at ECU. My advisor got me in touch with the liaison they had there, and he helped me out immensely knowing everything that was going to happen with my enrollment. And you'll also want to get in contact with financial aid to determine what will be going on with all of that, because they'll be able to tell you exactly. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have here. I'm just looking through my notes. But that should pretty much be it. And like I said, hopefully I will be back to making videos fairly regularly again. But I will see you next time.